Hello, Cancer. Welcome to your 2025 forecast. This is for Cancer Sun, Moon, and Ascendant sign, or rising sign if you prefer. And that's because when you have a rising sign in Cancer, that encompasses yourself and how you appear to the world, how you show up for everybody, and how you reach out into the world as well. It's kind of like the filter through which you look at your life, and it affects all of your life. So the ascendant sign will usually show up in a way that's quite evident. It's really something that you can count on as a guideline for where the different activities will show up in your life. If it's your sun in Cancer, that's very personal to you. It's your self-identity, it's your purpose, it's your career. It's the way that you consciously work your way through life, and it has a lot to do with your sense of why you're here. And that might especially show up in your outer directed activities. And then, of course, and that can also relate to men in your life. The sun represents men, important male figures in your life, and including fathers, your father, for example, or bosses or other important males in your life. And the moon, of course, is also your ruler. It's the ruling planet or the ruling luminary of Cancer. And so if it's your moon, it's very much how you feel about everything. It's about your thinking process. The moon is your mind, your memory. It's your connection to the past. It's your connection to family, to your mother particularly. And so if this does involve your moon, it's going to be very much how you're navigating your life, going through the emotional or the sort of psychological, mental relationship that you have to life. So it may not show up as obviously, although moon does represent, as I said, the mother. So this can have an impact on the life of your mother or older females in your life, mother-like figures. And also the moon represents home. So the moon can also be affected in such a way that when there's an aspect or some transiting planet moving over it, then there can be something happening around the home or in terms of your desire to move or to be in a different home environment. That can be the quality of the home environment as much as the place itself. So this is quite a year because you have Jupiter, which is exalted in Cancer, moving into your sign, and that's going to be on the 9th of July. So, what I'd like to do is take you step by step through the year. We're not going to look at Mercury, but we'll look at all of the other important planets and the shifts that they're undergoing in 2025. Every single one of the outer planets is changing signs, which is unusual in and of itself. And that's happening between November, a period of 6 months between November 19th of 2024 and July the 7th of 2025. So life is going to be moving fast, lots of change, just the way you like it, Cancer, because Cancer is a very dynamic sign, a cardinal sign, and there's a lot of cardinal activity this year. So let's have a look. Now, your rising sign I have put on the ascendant. I've put Cancer on the ascendant just so we can get a glimpse into the first or sort of most important events as the year begins. This is not the beginning of the calendar year. It's not the 1st of January, but it's the 3rd of January, where a number of really important things are happening simultaneously. It's quite the day. But you can give it a few days on either side. And in fact, there is a new moon in Capricorn on the 30th of December. And that's going to be at 10 degrees of Capricorn, if I remember correctly, or perhaps it's 9, 10 degrees of Capricorn. I've forgotten, but it's not about this year anyway. But because the moon is really important to you, Cancer, that's something to keep in mind. We're in a new lunar cycle that represents your relational sector, the relationship of seventh house ruled by Capricorn, where this new moon took place on the 30th of December. I won't be going through the lunations this year. It's too much to go through in a video of this nature. We're really doing an overview, and that alone is going to take well over an hour, possibly an hour and a half, depending on where we end up. But so the moons, you'll have to come back month by month and listen to what I have to say in the lunar forecasts coming through the year. It is very important for Cancer. So what the moon is doing, and especially around the eclipses, I will highlight for those more major transits. So sometimes it shows up specifically around the moon. So Cancer, you are already beginning this year with Mars in your second house, once again opposing Pluto. That's on the 3rd of January. This is the second opposition between Mars and Pluto. So actually, it will be at 1 degree. I've had to move the dial to just get Cancer on the ascendant, but later on the day between the 3rd and the 4th of January, we have a 1 degree opposition between Mars and Pluto. It's just not happening with Cancer on the ascendant. So we're well in the orb of that as soon as the new moon in Capricorn is in effect. And that continues, like I said, for a few days afterwards. So this is a really powerful opposition. And the first time that we had that opposition was from your sign, Cancer, at the very end. So the 29th degree of Cancer to the 29th degree of Capricorn is where the first Pluto and Mars opposition happened. And that was exact on the 4th of November. So there's something that's tying into the theme, but shifting the energy a little bit. Whereas the Mars in your first house was very much about yourself and your actions and the motives that you might have, your ambitions and drives, and also perhaps a need to defend yourself or to stand up for yourself, or a need to speak up and to take care of something that is important to you. That opposition from Pluto has been building for a long time because Pluto was at the 29th degree of your house of relationships in Capricorn, seventh house of relationships, for quite some time. It's been there really since sort of the beginning of 2023, and then back and forth into early Aquarius, which is your eighth house. And we'll talk about that shift just briefly because I've done a lot of exploring of Pluto in Aquarius, and I'm not going to spend the time doing that again because it's just too much other stuff to cover. So Pluto, please go and look for the videos of Pluto either at the end of Capricorn or the beginning of Aquarius, or both if you haven't seen those. There's a lot of information there, and starting from about 2 years ago when I actually first started uploading about Pluto moving into Aquarius. And I think the video is called No Fear because there shouldn't be any fear. Pluto is about what we need to transform, what we need to confront, what we need to really look at, and where we are engaging, and especially in terms of you, Cancer, and with the opposition to Capricorn, the energy of engagement in terms of any power struggles with other individuals, or where you might be giving away your power. And you will have learned that lesson since 2008, since the very beginning of 2008. And now that lesson is moving on. And where we find the opposition now with Mars and Pluto is much more about your values and the values of others, the things that you share with other people, things that have to do also with salary or income or your wealth, the money that you possess. That also includes your self-worth, your self-esteem, which is one of your own possessions, one of your own very valuable treasures. And so with Mars there may be some tension around that in the area of finances or in the area of how you earn your money and how that might impact your career, because Mars is the ruler of your 10th house of your career, and it's in a trine to the North Node, which is up there for quite some time since July 2023, and now leaving on the 10th of January. So just a week after this opposition between Mars and Pluto, the North Node moves out of your house of career and into your house of your vision for life, your sense of purpose, what you believe in, what you have faith in, which is Pisces and ruled by Jupiter, which for the moment until the 9th of June is in your 12th house. So Jupiter is your exaltation ruler, and it matters to you in terms of how you reach into that 9th house and also your 6th house of everyday work, because it rules those houses. But also because it does really well for Cancer, it's always going to bring you a little bit more benefit than perhaps other signs might glean. And especially after the 9th of January, the 9th of June, Jupiter will move into your first house. And that will be expanding you yourself, hopefully not physically, although sometimes people can put on a wee bit of weight when Jupiter crosses the first house, especially in a water sign or an earth sign. But it's more about expanding your sense of self and your sense of what you're ready to take on. Now, with the opposition to Pluto, the Mars opposition to Pluto, Mars is retrograde. This is the second opposition in the first degree of both Leo and Aquarius. So there's something new here that is about your way of sharing resources, sharing money, sharing values, how you might have to stand up for something based on unconscious fears or unconscious programming or family karma, family issues that are maybe secret or unknown to you, especially as Jupiter is in the 12th house of ancestors and the unconscious mind as well, where things are not entirely clear. There can be an enormous amount of spiritual awareness or psychological awareness that is coming through you. And we also see that because the South Node has been in your fourth house, which is a psychological place. It's the foundation, but both sort of esoterically and physically, it's the foundation of your life. It's the psychology or the thing that makes you feel secure and happy. And that's where we see a lot of activity in these fourth, eighth, and 12th houses just to start the year. So it's not necessarily going to carry on entirely through the year, but it's often considered to be like a theme that runs through the year because it's sort of it's at the very beginning. So if we look at the 1st of January chart, this is still the basic outline here. The Mars opposite Pluto can be very psychological, as I said, and that can stir up some anger or some frustration that you weren't aware that you had. And that can also be very healing then to really work through that and uncover that. And when Mars goes back into your first house, which will be the 6th of January and until the 18th of April, so strap up, you're really going to be agitated again, perhaps in the same way you were in October, because Mars is going back to those same degrees that it crossed through October. You had Mars in your first house, whether it's your solar first, your lunar first, or your actual first house of your chart, from the 4th of September until the 6th of December. I'm sorry, until the 4th of November when Mars moved into your second house. And then on the 6th of December, it's where it's stationed retrograde at 6 degrees of your second house, of your money and resources and your values as well. So this has been a slow moving journey, and Mars is going to take you back through that journey from January through till the 18th of April. And then it goes again into your second house until June, where it's going to be there for several weeks, 6 or 7 weeks, where Mars is then going to take its time to cross your second house. So whatever you're planning on now, in the very beginning of 2025, you're going to come back to that and review that. And in the second half of April, you get the third opposition between Mars and Pluto. And that's going to be at 3 degrees with Mars now direct and Pluto retrograde. So Pluto is currently direct and Mars is retrograde. That reverses at 3 degrees of both signs. And so there's something that you've understood in the meantime that you're working towards, and that Mars is going to take forward and bring forward into a new meaning for you, especially around the house of your career, also potentially around the house of your children or lovers or love affairs or just love in general, your self-expression, your creative expression, your entrepreneurial verve, and what you're doing in terms of business, which is all very strong anyway. With the Aries on the 10th house, many cancers tend to work for themselves. That works really, really well for Cancer because you just don't like having a boss. And I know that very well because I am a Cancer rising and moon, and I prefer to work for myself. Works much better. So the other thing that's happening on the same day as this Mars-Pluto opposition is that Venus is ingressing your ninth house, which is an absolutely brilliant ingress because Venus is exalted in your ninth house where Pisces is. Venus loves being in Pisces, and Venus loves being in the ninth house. Most planets do because it's all about expanding into a vision, a new way of looking at your purpose, your belief system, your political or psychological or religious or spiritual support system. And Venus is also extremely happy to join the moon, your ruler, at the same time. So as on the at the very end of Aquarius, the moon will be moving out on the 3rd into Pisces at the same time that Venus is ingressing. So it's not the same time exactly, but it's within the same 24-hour period. It's within the same day. So it's a really interesting ingress that is highly beneficial for Cancers. It's trining your sign, it's another water sign, and Venus will be in Pisces for a long time to come. She stays in Pisces all the way through the 4th of February, and then she will go back into then she'll go into your 10th house where she'll station retrograde. And because Venus is having her retrograde, which will station at 10 degrees and 50 minutes, 50 minutes of Aries, that retrograde station on the 3rd of March is going to slow her down. So she only is in the first 10 degrees of your 10th house in a square to you, but really bringing you some work, some benefits through work, benefits through colleagues, benefits through people who are wishing you well and who bring you some kind of assistance, let's say. That's going to bring you a lot of good fortune through February and March. And then Venus, let me check my dates here because I'm sometimes confusing things. So March, Venus is retrograding 2nd of March, and she's moving back into Pisces on the 27th of March. So that whole period of time from the 4th of February till the 27th of March, Venus is going back and forth from 0 degrees of Aries, which by the way is significant this year, the whole of 2025, that 0 degree point, that what's known as the Aries point of the chart, um, and up until 10 degrees and then coming back. And that's going to take her the better part of 2 months. So it's very beneficial, but there's something to reconsider. There's something that needs to be revised, perhaps also around home, because Venus rules your 4th house of home, but she also rules your 11th house of your gains, what you earn from your work. So there might be something that you're reflecting on in terms of how you're paid or how you price your products or your services or how you want to be seen to be engaging in society, in groups and associations, friendships, and your future vision. So something here really lingering in your awareness from basically the beginning of the year right through June. So the next dates to take in mind, to keep in mind for Venus are that she stations direct on the 13th of April, and she will station direct at 24 degrees, and she'll be stationing with Saturn at 25 degrees on the 13th of April. So that's a significant time as well, where that Venus will be then slowly moving her way back into your 10th house, and she'll arrive there on the 30th of April to leave again only on the 6th of June. So you see how long this journey is between your 9th and 10th house. We're having a really lovely, I say we again, because I'm part of this team, we're having a really lovely passage of Venus at the top of the chart, which has a lot to do with your vision for you, what you think you're here for, connections potentially with your father, 9th house, or your parents, 10th house, and also your sense of your ambition and your drive. Venus in Mars can have that juiciness around a drive and ambition around the work that you do, especially if you work with women or doing something that's artistic and creative or potentially spiritual, which is that Venus going through Pisces in the 9th house. Remember that she rules your 11th house of gains, other people, your future and the vision for your future, your hopes and dreams and the vision for everything to come, which is where Uranus has been shaking things up quite a lot since 2018. And then she also rules your 4th house of home, which of course for Cancer is very significant. It's very important. Where do I live? How do I live? What does that feel like? And who am I doing that with? The 10th house represents your social status. So because we have this shift from the 7th house into the 8th house with Pluto, there is that new, maybe reaching into intimacy, reaching into a new way of being in partnership with somebody, a new way of connecting with somebody in an intimate way with Pluto in the 8th. And at the same time, with that Venus transit, along with all of the other shenanigans that I will describe in a moment, there's a lot of awareness around your social status and the way that you show up, perhaps in terms of your marital status or your work status, how you show up to the world at large. So a really big year, I think, for Cancer. There's so much wonderful supportive energy that's coming through here. And this is we've only covered the first few days of the year. So we're really looking at something that right off the top is bringing enormous benefit to brighten up your year. Certainly, it's not been an easy ride for many Cancers for the last quite long time because Pluto has been in opposition to your sign, and that has been in an angular house, giving a square to your 10th and 4th houses and an opposition to the south. So there's been just an immense amount of adjusting based on who's in your life and what relationships are working for you or not. So let's have a look now at the end of the month, because there's an interesting thing happening here as we get to the 1st of February, but we really want to look at that as if it were, here, I'm going to just back things up now so that we get this. If we go hour by hour, we want to get Cancer on the ascendant. And with Cancer on the ascendant, that puts again all of this emphasis here in your ninth house of Pisces. And the Pisces ninth house is ruled by Jupiter. So that whole ninth house story, where the nodal axis is from the 10th of January in the North Node in Pisces and the South Node in your third house, ruled by Mercury in Virgo, that is going to create quite a dynamic shift for you because there's a lot of expansion in a big way in your life, whether that's expansion in your philosophy or by moving abroad or dealing with foreigners or dealing with clients who are abroad, because Saturn rules your house of clients, the seventh house of partnerships, and it's ruled by Jupiter here in the 12th house. Currently. So there's something here that's really pulling in foreigners, foreign lands, and bigger ideas in life that is significant all year long. So you have Jupiter in the 12th, as well as after June, and until June or the end of June 2026, you've got Jupiter moving through your first house as well, bringing even more benefit because it's going to be trinal. We'll look at that in a moment. So this particular pile up here at the, let's call it the last week of January, the first week of February, but exact on the 1st, is with the Moon, Venus, Neptune, and the North Node all at 28 or 27 degrees of Pisces. Now, that last couple of degrees of Pisces just carries a lot of weight in 2025. It's huge. A lot of events are going to be re-triggering that particular degree point, and especially then moving into the zero Aries cardinal point, the Aries point, or the 0 degrees of the zodiac, starting the whole new zodiac, is going to be triggered not only by the nodal shift from the beginning of January into the middle of January at that 0 degree point, but it's going to be triggered again by Venus moving into Aries, then by Mercury moving into Aries, by Neptune then moving into Aries, and then by Saturn moving into Aries, all of which are putting a lot of pressure, let's say, on the area of new beginnings, new starts, something that you're rebirthing. And for Cancer, it's really about your social status, your career, your ambitions, what you're invested in, what you really are hoping for. But all through this year, 2025, and the first half of 2026, your attention from the nodal axis is placed on this area of Pisces. And that can be something to do with your spiritual growth or your philosophical beliefs and the thing that guides you, your kind of guiding principle. It represents your father as well. It's the house of the father or father-like figures like teachers, gurus, and important guides, counselors, and people like that, or you becoming like that is another way that that can pan out. And then the ninth house is also about publishing. And that can be publishing in terms of the traditional publishing, like a book, or it can be the area of online publishing, like being, it's whether it be an ebook or a website or something along those lines. Especially because Uranus has been in your 11th house. We've had eclipses in the 11th house also over the last couple of years with emphasis on Uranus, and then Jupiter in April of 2023, no, 2024. So in April 20th, 2024, we had Uranus and Jupiter conjoining in your 11th house, and Jupiter, remember, rules your ninth house. There's been a lot of stuff coming up around becoming more visible, becoming more vocal in society, perhaps online, perhaps in a social circle that's actually local to you. And this continues with the North Node moving through the ninth house. So big dynamic change, something that you're growing into that is causing you to expand your vision for your life. And it's really that word vision. Why am I here? What's the purpose of my life? What is the overall tenor of the life that I lead? And the third house is where we find the South Node. And that's around your local space, your extended family, siblings as well, friends that you meet every day, the kind of people you see as neighbors or the people that you jump on the same bus with or whatever. That's your third house. It's about travel, but more in a local sense. The ninth house is travel, but with a purpose. It's travel to understand or to grow or to learn or to teach or to, like a pilgrimage, for example. And then that third house is also about your goals and your sense of the immediate vision for your goals, the what do I need to do right now, and skills that need to be developed. And that's less emphasized at this point. It doesn't mean it's not emphasized because the nodes always work as pairs. But it's just not as important. It's not the priority of this moment. And as the South Node goes through the third house, there will be much more of a sense of being visionary and seeing a bigger picture, a longer term or bigger picture for you, especially if you're a Cancer rising, than there was before, for example. So it doesn't mean that you're not learning either a new language or new skills or dealing with the minutia of the third house stuff, communications, exchanges, and so on. It just means that it's not necessary to put a lot of your attention there. Now, the North Node is calling your awareness to what is spiritual. That's kind of a natural fit for Cancer, especially with Jupiter in the 12th house this year. Cancers do tend to have this kind of quiet spirituality. That is part of one of the reasons for that is because Pisces is on the ninth house, and that's why Cancers tend to have that kind of innate sort of faith, even if it's not a religious faith, it can be at the very least a spiritual one. So this is a really interesting period of time, and I want you to think about what you're doing or what's occurring in your life, what becomes important in your life in those last few days of January and the first few days of February, especially around the 1st and 2nd of February. Take a mental note or write things down, keep a journal, and try to understand how all of this is shaping up in your life, because later on during March and even again later in the year, in the September eclipses, these degree points come back really strongly. And then you can tie the loose ends up where you see how things fit together in terms of what you're beginning and what you might need to be adjusting or leaving behind. All right. Now, all through 2024 and still in the very early stages of 2025, we have a Jupiter squaring Saturn. So on the 24th and 25th of December 2024, Jupiter at 14 degrees retrograde in Gemini and Saturn at 14 degrees direct in Pisces were squaring each other for the last time in these mutable signs. That square has been a source of frustration, no doubt, in terms of how you want to expand and how you want to reach out into life. And it will continue to be so until Jupiter starts to move direct and Saturn moves out of the orb of the square, which it already is really by the beginning of February. But just becomes easier once Jupiter is direct. And that direct station is on the 4th of February. So we have Venus moving in to Aries on the 4th and Jupiter stationing direct. It's going to be a very interesting first week of February. Very, I think, very beneficial. If you can plan some things around that, depending on your own chart, you can really use that energy powerfully. Very, very good for instigating things. And the thing about that Saturn square or the Jupiter square to Saturn is that it's the opening square, which is considered to be like the crisis of consciousness. It's an awareness of something. It's like a sense, especially for this configuration for Cancer, it's a sense of, I'm not sure why I'm doing what I'm doing anymore, or I've kind of lost faith, or I'm a little bit confused around how I should be showing up in terms of my belief systems, or in terms of how I practice my spiritual life, or my perhaps in this case can be in a more banal sense around foreign lands, or around travel, or around my vision for working in healing arts, because the Jupiter in the 12th can be a very profound healing quality as well, working in hospitals, working in clinics, working in even in prisons, for example. And maybe there's something of a loss of faith, not faith, but faith, that has had you doubting, or there's been an obstacle thrown your way coming from the ninth house. Now, this could be around fathers again, teachers, people of importance, or people who are in one way or another holding a lot of power. And while Jupiter is retrograding in Gemini in the 12th house, it's losing a bit of power because it's not in good dignity. It's in the 12th house, which is about loss, unless we're talking about spiritual things where that can work really well in your favor. Saturn tends to be a bit stronger at this point. Jupiter picks up a lot of dignity when it's moving into your first house. So that whole dynamic will change a lot. But Jupiter is ruling Saturn. and it's not entirely comfortable as it's doing so. So there's a little bit of a loss of confidence, a loss of faith. And that Mars in your first house, Mars in Cancer, which has been there already since the 4th of September, left on the 4th of November. There's a lot of fourths going on, isn't there? That has been there since then, and then back again on the 6th of January. That Mars in Cancer retrograde can also have you lose a sense of purpose or faith in yourself. And so there may be this moment, this kind of need to try and understand what it is that you're really doing and why certain things might be blocking you. That can be part of the story of the Mars and Pluto opposition, which started the year and which you will get again in the third week of April. So this dynamic of who decides what in my life becomes a kind of an internal quest as well, an internal idea. Who's the boss? Who's your daddy? And that I have this Jupiter squaring Saturn. So Jupiter for me is direct in Gemini, and it's in a separating square from Saturn in Pisces. I'm one of those early 1966 babies who have this configuration. And if you are born, let's especially say February, March of 1966, particularly February and early March, you have this in your chart. And that Jupiter square Saturn is really about this kind of feeling of you get something going, you've got all these plans, everything's working, and then something comes in and it's just like, no, that's not going to happen the way you wanted it to. So it feels like you're on your way to something, you're on your way to somewhere, and then something distracts you or blocks you or makes you do 5 things before you get around to doing the thing that you wanted to do, and then you end up so tired that you've forgotten why or how to do the initial thing. This is the story of my life. You just have to get used to it, but perhaps for a transit, it's not as overpowering. But because Jupiter rules that ninth house, it is something that has a consequence on your vision for why you're here and your sense of what you're doing while you're here, and a sense of what you have faith in. So there may be testing times right now where the faith is tested or your projects are tested, but hang in there because later on in the year, again at the zero Aries point, the Aries point of the chart being very significant because it pulls in the worldly experiences or the collective experiences with the personal and vice versa. That Saturn and Neptune conjunction at the 0 degree point is also going to be squaring Jupiter as it enters into Cancer in your first house. So that's going to be, I'll show you that later on, but that's going to be around the 9th, 10th of June right off the bat. So that's going to shift the energy immensely. And this whole obstacle and this kind of 2 steps forward, 1 step back, and 1 step forward and 2 steps back, this kind of frustration that has been building for months already is going to be a thing of the past. So that square began with the conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn at the 0 degree point of Aquarius. And we've spoken about this in other videos, so I won't linger on this, but it started at this point in your 8th house of a recognition of something very powerful, of what is behind you, the veil, as it were, or what is your deeper psychological motivation or your relationship to money that comes through other people or things that come through other people, what you share, including intimacy or ideas and values that you might share with other people. And as Pluto is going through that 8th house, that's churning up this 12th house by trine in a positive way, while Jupiter is there as well. And so a lot of this, the beginning of that cycle, which was the 21st of December, 2020, the grand conjunction or the great conjunction as it's called, it's like a marker of time, and we're starting this whole new cycle that is now being challenged. So whatever started for you at the end of December 2020 is now up for kind of a question. Like, is that really what I want? Is this working for me? Is this the right context for that? Now, Pluto is lingering close to that degree point, and it has been for 2 years. So there's been a lot of pressure and understanding around that particular point. And if you have a late degree Cancer, whether it's 26, 7, 8, 9 Cancer, whether that's your sun or rising or moon, this will have impacted you incredibly powerfully. Um, And now that is coming to its crisis point. The square, the opening square of that conjunction is a really important turning point. And this is the year where the turning is happening. You make the choice, you make the decision, you understand what you believe in, you understand what inner work might be necessary, or you understand also how you're connecting to your spirit, to your family ancestry, to the unconscious processes of the mind, to issues related potentially to trauma or to something that has to do with working around those topics. And you're now grappling with that as the year unfolds. So, as I said, by the summertime, it becomes a lot easier. The energy has shifted into something very new that is extremely positive and helpful for you. Not that this is not positive, it's just that it feels like an obstacle course that you're trying to overcome. Just to give you an example, in my personal life, I am trying to publish a book. I spent a lot of blood, sweat, and tears over 2 years to translate this book from French, a book on astrology. I've spoken about it a few times in different videos. I got the work done in the summertime, and at the same time, I finally found the inheritors of the copyright, which I couldn't find for a long, long time because they're not on social media. Their name was not known to me, and I had to track them down in different ways. I finally found them, and they've not really been very open to cooperation. They want to do the project, they want me to do the project, but they seem to be very um, difficult in terms of organizing something around the copyright and how to pay them royalties around this. So it meant that I had to change my whole format for the book, that I've had to scale back my expectations in terms of the publishing date, and it looks very much like I won't be publishing as I had hoped to before the first Jupiter-Saturn square in the end of 2024, and I now have to, or the second Saturn square, Jupiter in December, and I now have to wait until that unlocks itself in one way, shape, or form in the early months of 2025. So watch this space, but that's just one example. Of course, ninth house is publishing, 12th house is foreigners. These people are French, foreign languages, translation, all of that stuff has been combined. And this is my ongoing frustration at the moment. So just as one example. You might have some interesting examples too, which I'd love to hear because it's misery loves company when your creativity is being blocked. Right. So we've spoken now about this pesky challenge here with Saturn, but this beautiful pile up here in Pisces is something to keep in mind. Hold those dates in mind. And as we go forward in the year, see how that all unfolds for you because it's actually really, really lovely. Now we're going to go forward into, let's see, what's the next thing? Pluto in Aquarius we've spoken about, and I've spoken at length. You can find that in other videos. Venus we've spoken about. I want to speak about the nodal shift a little bit more because we've got an eclipse coming up. And so if we look at the eclipses, we'll look at that right now. The very first one to come up is March. And that eclipse, I'm going to just again move the dial simply to have you on the first house. So this will not reflect the actual point of the eclipse. Let's come back so we can see the actual eclipse times, and then you will see as I shift the dial how that changes. So that's going to be at 23 degrees of Virgo, 2356, so nearly 24 degrees. This is a total lunar eclipse in Virgo, and that's because the lunar nodes are very close to the moon and the sun in opposition. When the closer the nodes are, the tighter the totality is, or the stronger the totality is. And so we're here at almost 24 degrees of Virgo. So if you have anything in Cancer at, let's say, 21 to 28 degrees or so of Cancer, this will be very strongly impacting you. Perhaps even more because of the nodal axis still being very close to the end of the sign of Pisces. So let's give it up until 29 of Cancer. Also because Neptune is just lingering there. So let's just again move the dial. So we've seen that it's actually happening 6:54, the 14th of March in universal time. You have to, all of the times I'm giving you are universal time, all those dates. So you have to adjust for your local time and location. So here we now have Cancer back on the ascendant. This is now with Mars going direct. Mars has, remember, stationed direct in February, on the 24th of February, from 17 degrees, and we move now forward with Mars. Mars is now going to pick up some speed, so it's helping your 10th house at the time of this eclipse. But because we now have this lunar eclipse in the third house, there's something also tying it into your 10th house of career. The third house is all about communication, exchanges, your local space, siblings, your extended family. 10th house is your social status. It's your work status. It's your vocation, or your the thing that gets you out of bed in the morning. It's your ikigai. It's the thing that makes you feel you have a social purpose. And it's how people see you. And that's ruled by Mercury there. Mercury is ruled by Mars, and the moon is ruled by Mercury, and Mars is ruling Mercury. So these three houses are very closely tied into this whole eclipse, while the and North Node remains very close to Neptune. Again, that's the later degrees, that very, very end part of Pisces that's really being emphasized very, very strongly all through 2025. Here we have the sun with, and remember the sun should be at 23 degrees, not at 24 degrees, because I just had to shift the dial. The sun is with Saturn at this eclipse, and it's 1 degree away. And there's an opposition, therefore, to the moon. Saturn and the moon are opposing. Now, again, in September, we also get a Saturn opposition to the moon. You'll see that again at the later degrees. And so we're calling in some kind of tension here around what these topics represent. So what am I able to organize? What do I need to reestablish in terms of boundaries with the ninth house topics, meaning what I believe, what I want to expand in, what I might want to teach? Is there something that is connecting me to counseling or teaching, or in some way expressing what I believe to other people? And that moon there on the south node says there's something you need to let go. And that's a very local, practical, pragmatic area of the chart. So there's something here that is with reference to either a skill or a representation of your local space, your neighborhood, your the place that you work in, the place that you drink your coffee in. So the local stuff is changing for you. The third house represents your extended family, siblings as well, and there might be a change there because that moon is in a trine to Uranus, which is in the house of elder siblings, and it's also in the house of how you see your future. So there's something involving this vision for your future, or something to do with perhaps money that comes in through unexpected ways, or money that comes in a because of what you do, the money that you earn from the things that you do in your career, like the way you might have online revenue, or you might, in my case, hopefully have some kind of book revenue after all the work that I've done, despite the royalties that, of course, will be paid out. So these are the kinds of things that can come through the 11th house. And so what else is there to say about this eclipse? Yeah, so this is the thing where now Venus has retrograded. Remember, she retrograded on the 2nd of March. Here we are on the 14th. Her retrograde degree was 10 degrees and 50 minutes, 50 minutes of Aries. Now we have Mercury direct, but really, really slow. Both Venus and Mercury are really, really slow in your 10th house, hanging at these degrees. Mercury gets to this 9th degree and then stations on the 16th to turn retrograde. Venus is going to be moving back into the 9th house. And then for the next eclipse, you'll see that Mercury itself is back at the beginning of Aries. So there's a lot of connection, repeated connections here between your 9th and 10th house that show up again and again and again, that has a lot to do with who am I to the world at large, and what do I want to do about that? Or how do I want to engage in this sense of my purpose in life? Mars is ruling your 10th house, and the fact that it's in not a great dignity, because Mars is not happy in Cancer, but it is very strong in the first house. So there's a dynamism here because Mars is now direct, and it has done already this second guessing of itself, and maybe having to build up confidence, having to reconfigure the way that action is taken or that one asserts oneself. this is all systems go. Now, Mars is moving direct at this point, although slowly. Venus, Mercury, and Mars are all moving extremely slowly at this time through March. It is moving direct, and it's going to be moving beyond your first house, then finally as of the 18th of April. So we've still got a month of Mars to clear the 18th degree, where it's stationed at 17, stationed direct at 17, until it gets to the last degree, the 29th degree of Cancer. So these are slow-moving things, even though they're fast-moving planets. That means that there's something that requires a lot of contemplation around how you want to change, how things need to shift. And some of the shifts will happen in a way that is quite karmic, meaning you haven't got control over them. And that's especially true because of these outer planet changes that are also going to happen in succession over the weeks ahead of these eclipses. So let's have a look at the next eclipse that's coming up. Then we have an eclipse that's going to be happening on the 29th of March. Now, here again, look at the degree point. We have 9 degrees of Aries. Remember, at the 2nd of October, there was an eclipse on 2024. There was an eclipse in your 4th house in at 10 degrees of Libra. And that was a South Node eclipse, something changing around where you live or how you live, or connections with family, connections with your sense of what makes you feel secure or how you want to live your life. That all somehow shifted, and that's a longer, many months of change. But here now something new is coming in, new status, new change of program that is related to that. It's because of that, we're doing this. And this is the end of the longer eclipse cycle of 2 years that has been in Aries. So the actual nodes changed signs. They moved into Aries July of 2023, and they left and moved into Pisces on the 10th of January 2024. Pardon me, July 23 till January 2025. And so now what we have is the remnant of the eclipse cycle that began, in fact, in April of 2023, where the nodal axis was still in Taurus, but the eclipse happened at the very beginning, or rather at the very end of Aries in April 2023. Very powerful eclipse at that time. This time it's going to be with the nodal axis in the 9th house and the eclipse itself in your 10th house. This can have something to do with the father, again, or important male figures, or important parental figures. It is the sun and the moon together, or an important career decision, and the way that you want to reflect your ambition and your drive is shifting. And this is very, especially true, very personal to Cancer, because Mars is ruling that eclipse once again, still in the sign of Cancer. And so there's a mutual, what is called not a mutual reception, but a mutual generosity, where Mars is reconnecting with the moon. It rules the moon, and the moon rules Mars. So it's not in an aspect that we can call a clear aspect, and that would make it a mutual exchange. But the mutual generosity has also a favorable connection. And so there's something that you're doing or need to be doing that will show up in terms of how you want to show up outside in the world outside. Now, equally, we also have Mercury retrograding. Remember, it's this whole thing about the 0 degree point and the very last degree of, or 1 or 2 degrees of Pisces. So we have Venus retrograding on the North Node, and with Neptune, once again, remember back in the beginning of the video, I was talking about the last week of January and the first week of February, especially the 1st of February. And this is coming back again, this time retrograding. Venus and Mercury both are retrograde, and Mercury is coming back to beat that point once again. But before it does, for the second time, it's going to be at that cardinal point, that Aries point. So there's something extremely special about March that is shifting your way of showing up, whether it be your career or your sense of what you're here for. Your ambitions, your drives, your social status. Am I married? Am I not married? Do I like my job? Do I want to change my job? All of these things are changing now. And it's not so much about the job as much as it is about a career, an actual sense of this is what I do, this is who I am as I do it. A very, very big story. Now we have Jupiter direct at this point, and at the same time, we also have Pluto, which is moving along to that 30, the third degree of Aquarius. And remember that by April, by the third week of April, that degree point is going to be turning around. There's going to be a retrograde of Pluto at 3 degrees. And did I say 30? I think I'm so tired I said 30, but anyway, I meant 3 degrees. If I didn't say 30, it's not 30. And then we have that Mars in the third degree later on, and that will be the final opposition, the final tension there. And that's coming up 3 weeks after the eclipse. So it's going to contain part of this energy for change. All right. So the dynamic of change still includes this whole story of who is the boss, who's got the power, where do I maybe give my power away? Mars is in a sextile to Uranus, and Uranus is in a very strong square, rather sextile to Saturn. So there's a trine to Mars from Saturn. There's a sextile from Saturn to Uranus and from Mars to Uranus as well. So lots of engagement that is quite supportive. It's a kind of a feeling that something's coming together finally. So we're at the end of March. Remember, there was some tension, there was some confusion, a little back and forth in the beginning of the year. Doesn't necessarily mean things are bad or negative. It just means that things are not working in the way that we thought they would. And now we're finding a little more harmonious dealings because everything is in at least in the context of Saturn and Uranus and Mars, things are moving forward now. Things are moving ahead. All right, Cancer. Sorry about that. I had to leave to tend to some rain-related catastrophes, which is very appropriate for Cancer rising. I'm not sure if you have noticed the news, but in Spain, in my region of Spain, there's been quite a lot of rain and flooding. So we're very lucky. All is good here. But and quite appropriately, we were just about to talk about Neptune. So I'm hoping I catch up on the at the right time because I've taken a break, so now I have to try and remember where we were. But I think we were just about to get Neptune into Aries, so that happens actually on the 30th of March. This is actually showing 31st of March because I simply wanted to advance the clock to have to account for a Cancer rising. It makes it easier to explain the chart to you. And so the visual is quite strong. We have Neptune right at the top of your chart, Cancer. So whether it's your sun, moon, or rising sign, this is going to affect your public persona, your career, your the way that you consider your social status, the way that you consider your vocation, how you reach out into the public. That's the 10th house. It also refers to parents. It refers to people who are like parents, like bosses and other authority figures. And you're going to have Neptune here for quite some time because it's going to be a 14-year journey with Neptune in Aries. But Neptune only arrives in your 10th house on the 30th of March. And then, hang on just a moment, got to get that right. And then leaves on the 22nd of October. It will be retrograde. Did I write that down? Please look in the notes, in the show notes, because I didn't write down all of these things to remind me, but you will find all of those dates for all of these different planetary ingresses and retrogrades in the box below this video. So please have a look at that. But Neptune will be retrograding back into Pisces, in case you missed it in your ninth house, and that stays then all the way through until the 26th of January, 2026. And at that point, when it goes into into 2026, it doesn't leave anymore. It will be staying in Aries until 2038, which is a pretty mind-blowing date. I find these futuristic dates really hard to get my head around, but once upon a time I was talking about Pluto entering Capricorn, so there we are. And right, so this is going to be on the 25th, the 21st of May, 2038, if you want to put that in your agenda, and that's when Neptune will actually move into Taurus. So we do have Neptune for quite some time. It's generally speaking a 14-year journey through each sign. And when we have Neptune moving into Aries, it's like a preparation phase for the shift that's coming in 2 months afterwards, where Saturn moves in. So Neptune going into your 10th house initially is going to feel perhaps a little bit foggy or perhaps a little bit confusing because there may be some ideas around who you are or how you show up, or, and this is very important to remember, projections by others as to how you show up and who you are when you show up. And this is something to keep in mind because with Neptune at the 10th, at the top of the chart, there can be a lot of people who don't really see clearly who you are, and they might expect you to be a particular person or a particular way. Now, that can be in your intimate roles, but it can also be in your public life in terms of your career. So bear that in mind. This is actually extremely good if you are already a Neptunian type of person, an astrologer, for example, or a spirit guide, or somebody who works in healing, or somebody who works in acting, music, theater, cinema, this kind of thing. All of those creative pursuits are going to get your individual flair, and it can become what you do out in the world if it hasn't been yet. If it's not something that you're already taking on as a career, then it can become part of you and how people recognize you out in the public. Not everyone has a chart for recognition or fame, so bear that in mind. It can also be just how you present yourself out in the world. That can be, on a bad day, simply showing up rather dazed and confused. And so that's entirely up to how you progress through your own life and how you account for your own behavior. Neptune in the 10th also can suggest, again, these are possibilities. I would have to see your natal chart. Potential for being a little disappointed around something that you might have created or done, or the way that you had thought you wanted to show up in the world. And there may be a feeling of this is not really what I wanted. This is no longer who I am, and it's not how I want to show up. That doesn't mean you have to throw everything away. Don't throw the proverbial baby out with the bathwater, especially when we're talking about Neptune for a Cancer rising. But really consider in this period of time between, let's say, end of March and what was it now, the 22nd of October, use that period of time to understand where you might find yourself a little confused around your career direction or around your social status. Again, that can include marriage partners, marriage proposals, and so on. Is this real? Is this the thing I want? Don't rush into anything when Neptune is at the Aries point, which is that 0 degrees of Aries, the critical degree of the chart. It's the very, very beginning of the zodiac, and it's the very top of your chart. So in the Thema Mundi, remember that Cancer is the rising sign. And so this is the appearance of the global, supposedly sort of imaginary global chart that was created in the Middle Ages in Europe to kind of describe the dignities of the planets. At the time that Neptune moves in, speaking of planetary dignity, it's with the Sun in Aries, which is the Sun in its exalted position. We also have the Moon in its exalted position, and this is quite lovely because that, of course, is your ruler, Cancer. So there is something quite lovely and supportive, I think, for all of us, but especially for Cancer, because when the sun is in the 10th house, it's shining a light on you, and it's where you put your attention in terms of your desire to show up, your desire to take some kind of position or role of responsibility. And then when the moon is in the 11th, it brings you public attention, and especially a dignified moon in Taurus, because of course for Cancer rising, Taurus is your 11th house. We have, at the time that Neptune is arriving into Aries, both Venus and Mercury are retrograde, and Mercury, Venus, and the North Node are conjoined. And in fact, Venus and the North Node are almost exactly conjoined. And so this is something interesting because again, for me anyway, it tells me that there's something of a warning that you haven't understood quite yet what your life purpose is or how you want to reach out into the world, and that there's some finer details to notice. So this, remember that Venus moved into your ninth house at the beginning of 2025. The North Node moved into your ninth house a week later at the 10th, 11th of January 2025. And now Mercury has gone into your 10th house. Venus went into your 10th house just where the sun is as Neptune is arriving into Aries. So for me, this is too many coincidences not to pay really close attention to this message. And there's something here that says, just hold on, it will clarify itself over time. And I think it will be a little bit easier to understand, for example, once Venus and Mercury are moving direct. So for Mercury, that is going to be the 8th of April. And for Venus, Venus is going to take a lot longer. So remember, what was Venus doing here? She's retrograding back into Pisces until she stations direct only on the 13th of April, but she is in Pisces until the 27th of March. So from the 27th of March until the 13th of, no, hang on a minute, I've got that wrong. She's in Pisces. She stations direct on the 27th of March, and she leaves Pisces on the 30th of April. I hope I've noted all that down correctly now. And then she doesn't leave your 10th house where she's been prodding and getting you to pay attention, where all these planets really since 2023, and including the nodes, have been getting you to pay attention. That remains very favorable for you until the 6th of June. So Neptune is still going to be in Aries at that time, but Neptune will be retrograding by then. And so there's something here that we can look at in terms of a what if kind of scenario. Where do we go from here? Maybe a little bit of this, but you're not yet sure. Take this to heart, not only for a job or a career switch or an idea that you have, but also a new relationship. The change in status can be whether it's a divorce or a marriage or somewhere in between. You may see things and then think, oh, I'm not so sure now. So just give it time, unless you are absolutely sure, and that's already been something brewing for a while. Give it time, because then the second passage of Neptune through your 10th house will be much more clarifying. Now, to the rescue comes this ingress of Saturn. And Saturn, oh gosh, we're going to have to go back here. I'm going to go forward again, and we're going to move, oops, there we go. We're going to move Cancer onto the ascendant. So this is not exactly the ingress time, but it's the same date. So Saturn is now joining up with Neptune on the 25th of May. Notice that Venus has left your ninth house finally. Mercury long ago left your ninth house. And it is, remember that was on the April 4th. And April 8th, pardon me. And so now we've got Venus alone in new territory. She hasn't given you this information yet. We've got Mars out of the way because now Mars is for the next 2 years is done with Cancer. It has moved out of Cancer on the, what was it now, the 18th of April. I'm giving you all the universal times, by the way, so it'll be 17th, for example, if you're in North America, South America. So Mars is now firmly in your house of money, and it's trining Venus as Saturn moves in with Neptune. And Saturn is very grounding. It concretizes things. And that's very helpful because you're going to get a deeper sense of what is possible, what is stable for you. We also have an almost 25-degree North Node, which is squaring Jupiter by less than a degree. So we're or a degree and a half, I guess it is. And so we're looking at something that's quite different now, a very qualitatively different kind of operation with Neptune. I still think it's better to go slowly, advance slowly, because Jupiter in a square to the nodes is also a question around what you intuitively understand or what wisdom is telling you need to do, and in this case in the 12th house to let go of. to release, or perhaps in this case, for example, teaching or traveling or journeying far away, um, or moving far away, any of those different things. These will perhaps be questions that you're asking yourself around this time, because again, that's also a change of status. Mars is changing not only your financial situation, probably for the better in some way at this stage, um, but also it's changing your values. And that's also something that has been tested in each of the three oppositions between Mars and Pluto from the end of 2024 and now into April, when the last opposition at 3 degrees happened when Mars ingressed in the third week of April. So we're looking at a lot of change that now feels more stable, but we're not quite there yet, Cancer. So just with Saturn moving into the 10th house, it's kind of like saying, okay, the adults are back in the room, and I know now I have to show up. Now, it doesn't always happen overnight, as happens with Saturn. We have to learn the hard way how to take responsibility, how to show up as an authority figure, how to show up in one's power. And that is a really key word here, I think, with Saturn and Neptune sextiling the Sun with Mars in the second house. I do feel you've got a lot of confidence around this end of May period, but we're still not quite there yet, because there is this situation of Jupiter, which is at the end of the 12th house, which is still a little bit hidden. It's not quite where we're ready yet to show something out in the world. Now, the other thing is that Saturn is not in good dignity when it's in Aries. It's considered to be in its fall, because Saturn is exalted in Libra. And an exalted Saturn is something that allows us to structure things, restructure, and help things to stabilize. Whereas Saturn in Aries can lack confidence, or it can be impatient and not want to do the hard work. And which means that there's going to be some kind of pain involved. It's ruled by Mars. This Mars is quite confident as well. So Mars is in a fire sign, Saturn is in a fire sign, and this Mars is trining Venus at the ingress. So again, I feel that this is quite helpful, but you want to really get to this point where you have a lot of clarity around your own motives, clarity around what it is that you want to do out in the world, and clarity around who you want to be, because this is how people will see you. As Saturn, Neptune, and now Venus are in your 10th house, there's a whole different vibe around how you picture your role in the world. And this can also include, by the way, it's not necessarily about stepping up into a career. It can also be about stepping back. It can also be about retiring. It can be about a decision that says, this is not working any longer. I don't want to do this, or whatever struggle I've been going through. I don't want to do this anymore. And now this is where Saturn is going to get you realigned in terms of how you do your work. When Saturn is with Neptune, it's an awful lot easier to bear than Saturn in on its own. Equally, the reverse is true. So Saturn and Neptune are stabilizing each other, but at the same time, it means that there's an old structure that is disappearing, that is dissolving, that is moving along. It's something that's different. And because of this sextile to the Sun, and remember, I had to advance the clock a little bit, so it's even tighter than it appears. But there's a separating sextile to the Sun that's still relevant here. The Sun itself is trining Pluto, which is very powerful and very sort of, there's a lot of conviction here. There is something here about recognizing where whatever it was is done. It's kind of done, and we need to make this look like something new. And again, it doesn't mean that it's walk away and never look back kind of time. For some of you, depending on your chart, that might be the case. But this is about recognizing that there's a status or a job or a public role or a career that is no longer it for you. It's not that thing anymore. So we have Saturn there until it's going to go retrograde on the 13th of July in the 10th house, and then it goes back into Pisces. Sorry. Yeah, it retrogrades on the 13th of July. Sorry, I need to check my notes here, because I've messed my notes up as I it'll be easier if I check it online rather than trying to find the details here. So Saturn retrogrades 13th of July, and it only gets into not even the second degree. So the degree gets into 1 degree 56 minutes. And then it goes back into Pisces on the 28th of November. So we do have a long period of time of Saturn kind of hanging out in the first and second degree of Aries, which remember, these are critical degrees. Neptune, very similar. Neptune is there until the 22nd of October. So for Saturn, it's just a few weeks later because they have almost the same kind of journey time. Neptune is 158-day retrograde and Saturn is 137-day. By the way, I'm getting all this information from AstroSeek, which if you don't know AstroSeek and you are an astrologer or a budding astrologer, you absolutely want to get to know them because they are an absolutely extraordinary resource for information. I used to use a book ephemeris. I never do anymore because I use online ephemeris like AstroSeek. And of course, they're in my software as well, but even I find AstroSeek much more user-friendly. So just a little plug. They're completely free, by the way. They are just an extraordinary resource for astrologers. So I hope I haven't messed that up for you. I hope that was clear. So we have until the end of November, essentially, until Saturn moves back into Pisces. And then when it moves back into Pisces, it's going to station at 25 degrees of Pisces. So it gets back to 25 degrees. Let me just check again. Have I got that right? Now I'm confusing my dates just to be absolutely sure. No, that's the station. So let me just go here. Saturn retrogrades until it gets back to 25 degrees of Pisces on November the 28th. So in fact, it actually gets into Pisces before then. Let me just check this with the ingress chart. So you have ingress charts and you have regress charts. So here we go with Saturn. Saturn leaves Aries. Indeed. So Saturn leaves Aries on the 1st of September. Now, remember, I'm going to put all of these dates underneath the video. So please check because I'm making a bit of a dog's breakfast of all of this and I apologize. But I'm trying to get you the interpretation, not the details, because we'll be coming back to this again and again and again. Right. Now we're going to have a look at Gemini and the shifts that are coming up between Jupiter and Gemini, and then later with the ingress of Uranus. So Jupiter is moving now from Gemini. We're going to go forward again to get you on the rising sign. So we've got Jupiter now moving into Cancer. That's going to happen actually on the 9th universal time. And with Jupiter now in your first house, it's the final square between, and that will be the 11th, 12th of June. Let's call it the second week of June because these things are slow enough that it's just a question of exactitude. But when Jupiter moves into your first house, it's coming along with Mercury and it squares Saturn and Neptune. So this is, again, a really powerful shift. There's something incredibly inviting here. I find it very supportive, even though it's a square that says, do this thing, because now we're talking about cardinality, where before the square was mutable. And so there's a little bit of a directionless quality with mutability. There's a tenuousness where with the cardinal energy, there's a feeling of all systems are go, now go. At the same time, we have Mars about to leave the second house after this eternal transit between the first and second house, and it's approaching a square to Uranus. So whatever this is, it requires a big adjustment. It's a personal adjustment that might have something to do with money, income, again, your social status. You might be moving, for example, you might be moving in with somebody, moving out. You might be deciding to, like in my case, if I haven't published my book by that point, I swear I don't even know when it's going to happen, but it's let's call that the last straw or the last deadline for doing something like that. So whatever this the last year of Jupiter in Gemini has been brewing for you, that movement of Jupiter in Gemini has been kind of busy working behind the scenes, or perhaps having you reflect more deeply on your inner experience of life. Now Jupiter is saying, let's go. We're ready now. Go out the door. Do this thing. See yourself in a different light. See yourself in a bigger place. See yourself with more responsibility, that Neptune and Saturn conjunction, and see yourself standing up in your own life. Now, Mercury is moving in with Jupiter. It's almost like the escort. It was the ruler of Jupiter all that time. It kind of carries the king. So if we think of Mercury as the prince and Jupiter as well, I guess it's more like the priest or the teacher, the counselor, the advisor. It's carrying this guru on over the border between Gemini, which it rules, and Cancer, where Jupiter is exalted. So now we have a lot of really interesting dynamics coming up, and this sets the stage for Jupiter for a new Jupiterian cycle for Cancer, which is very personal because it's your first house. So there's a new vision for yourself that's being created now for the next 12 years. And this continues all the way through until July 2026. So it's a really lovely long journey that you're going to have at the same time that Saturn is saying, look, step up and either clean up your mess or take responsibility for your career or for your family or for a marriage or for a relationship or for a goal or a vocation and whatever. Jupiter is ruling the moon in the sixth house, and this suggests that you're going to be busy because of all of this. We didn't need the moon to tell us that, but you're going to be busy because there's an engagement here that is really personal. And so Cancers are going to have a lot of dynamism, a lot of busyness, and this is something to expand into. It's always a blessing when there's a mutual exchange here. So it's a mutual generosity again, although actually it is a trine, so we could call it a mutual exchange, except that the moon is moving fast and it's separating away from Jupiter. So let's just come back. I just want to see how close that is in the actual ingress chart. Where's the moon? Yeah, that's for sure a trine. No, that's not a trine. That's an inconjunct. Oops. Okay, different story. But anyway, we still get a mutual generosity. Hang on, let's just see. I'm going to have to go forward again. And so we're looking at something that is quite supportive either way. So it's an inconjunct. Sorry, it's a bit late in the day, so now I'm getting a little tired. All this rain and mopping up and dogs and all kinds of things going on. Very Cancerian stuff. Very moon in the sixth house, let me say. So this story of the moon is anyway, at the very least, a mutual generosity with Jupiter, which means that moon in the sixth house puts you firmly in a position where you're ready to get your hands dirty and work and expand into something quite new. Jupiter in the first house will expand your sense of self, but also can expand your relationship energy. So people will find you more appealing or more generous or more invested, and you yourself will be more motivated as well to reach out to other people. So a really fantastic opportunity. We've got Venus also sextiling. So this is also very harmonious, very supportive. And again, with that square to Neptune and Saturn, we're trying to make a decision. We're making a plan based on something that we've already been working with. Remember, that battle between Jupiter and Saturn is not a new one. It's just that, okay, now what do we do about this? Jupiter is almost like daring Saturn to stop it because Jupiter is exalted and Saturn is actually in fall. So Jupiter is like, yeah, I dare you to tell me to stop now. Now, just be careful because remember, as I said, we do need to take some time to reflect, meditate, and try and figure out, is this the right thing for me this year? And so give yourself the year that Jupiter's in your first house to be more convinced about what it is that you're going forward with. By the time that Saturn and Neptune come around in February, on the 20th of February, 2026, when they conjoin and come back into your 10th to remain there for a while, that will be much, much clearer. It's not to say don't do anything in the second half of 2025. It's just to say if it feels confusing or if you're not really sure, then don't fret. Just recalibrate, invest. All right, we're going to have a look here now at, sorry, we're going to look now at Uranus going into Gemini. Now, we're going to just shift the time. We're going to have to go all the way forward because otherwise I will lose the Uranus in Gemini bit. So we're going to keep plowing forward until we get you on the rising sign. There we go. And so when Uranus moves into the 12th house, this again is not permanent. This is a temporary move, and Uranus is going to zig and zag a little bit between Taurus and Gemini for a while, but this is actually quite an astonishing shift. It's something that is going to be felt by all of us, just like when Saturn and Neptune go in, just like when Pluto went into Aquarius. These are big cultural shifts. And in this case, when Uranus moves into Gemini, we also have accompaniment. So Venus, just like with Mercury before, with Jupiter, Venus is escorting Uranus out of Taurus and bringing Uranus into Gemini. Mercury itself is in Leo, so it's ruled by the Sun, which is currently hanging out with Jupiter in your first house. So there's a whole lot of shifting that's happening here, a lot of energetic shifting in the summertime. And it's kind of the completion of the bigger shocks or shifts that are happening throughout our culture and throughout our lives, where things are shifting dramatically. Uranus accompanying Venus and then in a trine to Pluto in the eighth house is going to bring a lot of awareness for Cancer, Sun, Moon, and Rising, a lot of awareness to the unconscious mind, to the way of reflecting on your spiritual life, perhaps connecting with international uh, either clients or work or travel or studies or spiritual studies as well, especially as the North Node is in the ninth house at the same time, pulling that in. And you personally, and with Jupiter in your first house, are ruling that North Node. Jupiter's ruling the North Node in Pisces until July, end of July, beginning of August 2026. So this is quite a dynamic shift, and there's something here that is going to be quite a revolution in your life for 7 years. And Uranus in the 12th can really wake you up to things that you didn't really pay attention to before, dreams, for example, or hidden information that might come through some random source, or you might become even more interested. I suppose if you're watching this, you already are, but with Pluto in the 8th and Uranus in the 12th, I suspect you'll be even more interested in having some kind of a practice, whether it be occult sort of tarot type practice or um, shamanism, obviously astrology, and all of these kinds of things. All of that is going to become extremely powerful and rich, even for some of you in mediumship or something that might have to do with connecting with people beyond the physical realm, whether they're still living or not, or whether they were ever a human or not. So there again, there's something to do with what you do every day, by the way, Cancer, because we have that moon once again in the sixth house at this ingress, just like we did for Jupiter. Jupiter is ruling that moon, and now the moon is also in an interesting dynamic. It's in a trine to Mercury, although Mercury is approaching the trine, and it's in a square to Mars. So there's some adjustment that is required. It's approaching. So this is something that is coming your way. But this suggests to me that there's an adjustment to your everyday life, so that this Uranus is not just kind of hiding behind the veil somehow, but it's going to cause an everyday life adjustment. Mars in Mercury might have something to do with a sibling, or something to do with your neighborhood or the people around you, or your goals, especially short-term goals and your drive and your willpower. It might be that you require that willpower, or it's something to do with teaching or wanting to write or teach or learn. Something's great when you have Mars in the third house, to learn new skills, for example, that would beef up then that need to show up more in your day-to-day life that Saturn and Neptune are also encouraging you to do. And then Mercury in the second house can also reflect some issue around money. Now, Uranus is also with Venus, both in the house of loss. So the 12th house is where we might notice financial loss, although I'm not sure what that could necessarily represent, because it's in a trine to Pluto, and that can often refer to financial gain. But it's a change. It's not necessarily good or bad. It's a change that might relate to finances. It might relate to people in your life. There may be a loss, again, of a friend or a sibling. It might be something that you need to put more attention on. The second house where Mercury is ruling Uranus, ruling that Venus, and ruling the Mars is about family as well. It's about income. It's about your values. It's about what you hold in terms of assets. It's also about spending potentially. That can also be where the loss might come in, where it's like I have to invest something, and I wasn't sure I was ready to do that. Venus represents the fourth house, so she rules the fourth house, and she rules the where is Venus? Where Venus represents, of course, yeah, we just left the 11th house of gains. So this Venus is moving into the second house of the house of gains, and she's moving into the ninth house of the fourth house. So it looks like there may be some gains from moving abroad or gains from working with people abroad, gains of support or friendship or even romance that comes from somebody from abroad. So this is not necessarily negative. I would need to see your natal chart, but just to say that whatever's going on here with Uranus going into your 12th house, it affects your day-to-day life. Obviously, it's not because it's going in the 12th house that it's like this kind of woo-woo, let's see what happens. It's going to be affecting you. This might be because we still got Saturn really at the top of the chart, and with Neptune, that whole thing about systems falling apart, systems crumbling, which we had in 1989 with the Berlin Wall falling. That was quite literally a wall, Saturn, which was dissolving. Now, that was in Capricorn. That was a different energy. Here we are talking about Aries. And so there may be some incident, some global incident that has to do with assertion or aggression or even potentially war that is actually affecting lives. Now, again, statistically, that's going to be likely for some of us. But it's not going to be the story for all of us. So there may be some day-to-day adjustment based on the occurrence of war. Remember that the Uranus, when it moves into the sign of Gemini, it actually is going to eventually come across the descendant and Mars of the United States. And that'll be later on. But once it enters the house, there's usually some kind of war, often a civil war, and or a major war that the U.S. gets involved in. So the U.S. has never not been involved in war. I think there's literally 1 year in their entire history where they've not been involved in war. So don't think that this is something new. It's just that this may shift our day-to-day environment. Right, let's move on, and we're going to have a look at the eclipses now. And we did the spring eclipses. Now we're going to move to the autumn eclipses, or I guess, late summer for the northern hemisphere and spring for the southern hemisphere. We're looking at the 7th of September. Let me just check that I haven't forgotten something about Gemini that I wanted to say. Right. Right, so look at this now. We'll have to move again. Sorry, we're just going to wheel this around until Cancer comes on the ascendant. There we go. Now, this eclipse, these whole eclipse cycles are going to be happening in your ninth house. So this is always where the North Node is going to be. And at this point now, we're into September. It's the 7th of September where we have this eclipse. I just had to move the wheel forward to make it clearer that we're still working on Cancer rising. So the North Node is with the moon, but it's at 15 degrees. This is actually a North Node lunar total eclipse. It's a 15-degree moon, and the node itself is at. And you see then just only hours later, the node and the moon actually correspond, but the node is at 18. Now, this puts that eclipse in a trine to Jupiter. So again, something seems to be working for you. It's working in your favor. Something very strong here with Mercury in the third house, where it loves to be, and where on top of that it rules and is exalted in Virgo. So it's dominating the sun. It's dominating the south node. And then Jupiter, which is in great dignity itself, is dominating the north node and moon. And then here's that retrograde Saturn, which is coming back under the auspices of Jupiter. And we now have all of the outer planets in retrograde with the inclusion of Saturn. So we have one of these many sextiles that we're going to have between the outer planets. There's a trine between Uranus and Pluto, and then this sextile this is an ongoing story, a century-long story, passionate love affair between Neptune and Pluto, and then again between Uranus and Neptune, which is the new story for 2025. So these are very supportive. This is a really helpful energy. This gives us a lot of energy for flow and support, but we're working backwards with these outer planets. So it's a flow and a support, but it seems to be with reference to what has already been, with reference to what we need to come back and explore. And with the Jupiter in a trine to the North Node, this seems to be where there's a personal desire to move forward. You're ready somehow to move forward with this, but yet it's not quite there yet. So the full moon is always going to show you, highlight something that you need to understand. And in the ninth house, it can be something to do with your belief system or where you feel you're going in terms of your life purpose. There's something that you become aware of that you think, well, this could be it. But then the outer planets are saying, well, just hang in there a minute because we're not quite done with the last few years of your life. So we're going to come back and just check in again. So again, don't despair. This is that kind of necessary reflection. And especially because Jupiter at this point is still direct and it's very, very supportive in your first house, you're really reaching into something quite new, quite helpful, and you will also be able to find your way forward. So Jupiter in the first house brings you a lot of chutzpah, lots of optimism, and a feeling of can do. Okay. Um, that is September 7th. So remember, it's not the 8th, it's the 7th of September. I just had to move the dial. And then we have on the 21st of September, we have the last eclipse of the year, and that's at 29 degrees. Now, remember earlier, I said, please take good care to follow these degree points. The very last degrees of Pisces, and the very last degrees of Virgo, and the very first degrees of Aries. And then that implies the first degree of Libra, but especially Aries. And so we're looking here at something, and here we're going to have to shift this again so we can see more clearly. So we're looking at something here that affects, that's very annoying, isn't it? All right, well, we've lost our we've lost our solar eclipse here, but at 29 degrees of Virgo, we have this conjunction between the sun and the moon that is starting something new in your third house, but it's in opposition to this retrograde Saturn. So again, we're looking at something that is a yes, but. Yes, but. And so each time that that's happening, we need to reflect. There's something that we need to check in with. This again can have something to do with the way we communicate or the local space or where are we living? What is our neighborhood like? What's going on with my siblings? What's going on with my extended family? How do I deal with monetary exchanges? And especially since Venus herself is in the third and squaring Uranus, there may be something shaking up around monetary exchanges or some kind of financial dynamics that you have that you need to take charge of. The third house again is about willpower and your drive and in the short run, the kind of goals that you might have over a short period of time. Where the ninth house is about the long-term goals, and Saturn is like, get those clear. Let's really focus. Is this the thing? Remember, that's a transit that's 29 years with Saturn. So it was already asking this question, if you're old enough, back in 1995, 96, and was it even into the beginning of 97? So that, at the very least, 95, 96, Saturn was asking this question of you. Now it's trying to finalize the answer 3 decades later. So this is quite significant because whatever is starting out here in the third house, that might be with reference to a choice or an aim that you might have, it needs to be in alignment with what you have decided is your purpose, with what you have decided is the message, what you want to teach, what you want to reach out into the world with. And that Saturn up there is a cautionary tale saying we didn't yet understand this. And remember, we're coming back to that 28-degree point, 29 degrees, 28, remember 27, 28, 29 of Pisces. And that means then all of the mutable signs or anywhere in your chart that you might have that can be affected. And that's going to show up as something that is saying, remember what was going on at the end of January and the beginning of February, because here we're looking at that in a different light. Now we're looking at that. We have to review that. And remember, as Saturn is going back And Saturn is stationing direct at 25 degrees on the 28th of November. Uh, that is where you're going to have a clearer understanding, um, that you're going to know how to go forward. So we're looking at 2 months away from this eclipse that you'll be feeling like ready to go and really sure. At that point, Jupiter will be retrograding. And so we're looking at something that will be quite dynamic throughout the year. Jupiter retrograde is just a slowing down to try and help you understand again where you've advanced and where you still need to assimilate what you've done, how you need to assimilate how you've got to this point and integrate that so that you embody it. Jupiter in the first house wants you to embody that wisdom, embody that understanding. I see this as quite favorable nonetheless. I do really appreciate working with Saturn. A lot of people are afraid of Saturn. A lot of people find that it's somehow an obstacle to success or whatever. It's not at all the case. It's really important that you integrate your Saturn, that you really understand the lessons of slowing down, questioning, being clear, being concise with your vision, because also the challenge with Jupiter in the first house and the ninth house north node is that you might want to go everywhere all the time, all at once. And especially as Uranus is in the 12th house, Lord knows what's going to be going on behind the eyes. So just to say, I think this is very helpful. Look at Saturn as a friend. Look at Saturn as trying to get you to the top of that mountain. It's definitely what it's been trying to do over these last many years. And go back to that period of time when Saturn was there in the chart, which would have been 1996, and when the North Node was there in your chart, which would have been 2006, so the second half of the year and into 2007. Right. I'm going to leave it at that. So, Cancer, truly have a wonderful year. I'm right there with you. We're doing our best. That's what people are doing all the time. We're doing our best, and we're going to make the most of it. And of course, as we love to do, we want to be there for other people and help them, but we also have to take care of ourselves so we don't become exhausted. So make sure that Jupiter in the first house includes a little bit of me time and not just to extend and reach out to other people. So lots of love to all of you. Happy New Year, and I'll see you in a video in the future. Thanks for being here.